What's up, y'all? It's Shuffle, and today's video is going to be talking about setup moves. I don't really know the official name or better name for this, but just moves that you have to either put some time into setting up to make them do good, or moves that have some kind of penalty that you have to offset at a later time. So before we get started, if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, leave your thoughts down below in the comments, check out the box for all the cool links like Discord, Twitter, Twitch, Patreon, and the Epic Game Store code. Thanks to everyone that does that. Even the people that buy V-Bucks. I can't believe people buy V-Bucks for that thing, but they're doing it. So thank you. So this is talking about specifically moves like Howling End, but there are a few others like Burning Stars, Anamnesis, Occultist has a few of these. Courageous Abandon's another one, Finale's another one, and then probably Cause of Death. There are some other cases to be considered, like anything with Leper using Ruin or Revenge or whatever, but really it's going to come down to Howling End and how pretty much everything else stacks up against it. Once the December patch is out and I have more of a reason to cover heroes more in depth, like I did the Grave Robber video that came out like a week ago, 2 weeks ago at this point, then I'll do that. I'm kind of holding off on to see what changes they make going forward. So with Howling End, everything's going to be kind of measured against this because I feel like this is the current best in terms of like big damage move for big payoff with like penalties that you have to deal with. So we'll get to Cause of Death like before that though. I think Cause of Death is interesting. Occultist is the easiest one to talk about. So Occultist has a few different things. He gets unchecked power, which is the Burning Fist token. He gets some mostly from Chaotic Offering, but stuff like Binding Shadows and Sacrificial Stab on combo give him these unchecked power tokens, and he can spend them to augment some of his other moves. Abyssal Artillery gets double stun, which is actually pretty good. He gets access to Malediction if he has 2 tokens. He gets Anamnesis with 2 tokens, and then Burning Stars with 2 tokens. So Burning Stars is like the closest thing to Howling End in terms of like damage and what it's doing. It takes 2 turns to get going because you have to use Chaotic Offering and then burn it afterwards, no pun intended. Meanwhile, Howling End you can do on turn 1. That's part of the reason it's so good. But you get the same thing of ignoring block, and then you get like a secondary effect. In this case, you get a combo token. So Burning Stars is a really good move. If you've not tried Burning Stars Occultist, you should. I have a run where I focus on it if you want to go look at that. But the reason Burning Stars isn't as good as Howling End is because you can't do it on turn 1. Occultist is kind of a pretty fast unit. I think he's got like 5 or 6 speed this time around. I can't remember the exact number. And, you know, on the second turn, enemies like Cherubs can put up dodge, and then Burning Stars becomes bad. You can use Chaotic Offering and then get blinded, and then Burning Stars becomes bad. Like, it becomes a risk to use. You can get weakened, and then Burning Stars becomes less desirable. The specific reason that Burning Stars is very good is because it is, I believe, the strongest hitting move, besides maybe Finale, that can hit rank 4. So we do need to consider that. Howling End can only hit the front, but that actually is fine. So for Burning Stars, you want it to go off on turn 2 and almost kill something in rank 4 if you can, or crit and kill it, or just kill it outright. That is what you want this move to do. Howling End can do that to frontliners. Meanwhile, Burning Stars will struggle because there's some enemies, like I said, Cherubs can get dodge, some of the Fanatics get dodge, some enemies like the Urchin can go into stealth. There are the Pigs and the Sleuths, they go into stealth and they have dodge sometimes. So this move struggles sometimes at what it's best at. Howling End usually does not. Anamnesis. This move is fantastic. It's just the issue that Occultist has to be up front, and then the same thing again. You're spending 2 tokens to cleave the entire enemy team, and usually in Darkest Dungeon, single fire damage is better. There are merits to cleave, and this move is still very good, but you have to do it on turn 2. So you've already done some damage to the enemies. Your bleeds may not go for their full duration and stuff, so it's still good. It's still a very good move. Malediction. This move should be like 1 unchecked power token, just because it comes out as a debuff, which means it targets the enemy's debuff resist, and then they can resist it. And then once they resist it, you just wasted like 2 turns doing nothing. And if it does stick, every enemy usually has 1 resistance that is higher than the others, and you don't get to pick which damage type you're going to get. So Malediction, again, can struggle. And then we talked about Artillery already. So I'm hoping you're seeing kind of the idea, right? Where it's like, how much work do you have to put into these moves to get them to be good or ideal or whatever, compared to how much payoff they give you? And so far out of this entire thing here, Artillery's pretty solid, Malediction is below average, Anamnesis is good, and then Burning Stars is the best, but it's still nowhere close to Howling End. Then we have Jester with Finale. I do not like Finale in this game. I didn't like it much in the first game either, but I did a Finale run before and it struggled mightily, and part of it is because Jester doesn't really mesh with Finale right now. I know there are people that have made it work. You know, I've gotten comments and stuff like that. People say Finale's good, and that's fine. I'm glad you got it to work. But the issue with Finale is the best combo character in the game is Jester. So this takes 2 turns for him to do. And the game wants you to use solo, if I can find it right here. So solo, when... does that have to be upgraded? I think when it's upgraded, it applies combo. So you can solo into someone, put down combo, and it can still miss. So that's really cool. By cool, I mean not cool at all. And then next turn, you have to Finale. And then once you Finale, you debuff yourself mightily, you give yourself vulnerability and daze, and that kind of sucks. So with this, it's the same issue. Jester is the best person to set combo, and he's pretty fast. So that means any other person that can set combo usually isn't going before him. Like, look at Burning Stars, this sets combo, but you need to do it on turn 2. Which means Jester reliably can't be doing this on turn 1, unless you want the very average, well, a bit above average, but the very bad, mediocre damage of 6 to 12 for a move this costly in terms of opportunity cost. So with Finale, it's again not as good as Howling End. It also gets shafted by block and dodge and all that stuff. It doesn't pierce Deathblow resist. There are a lot of issues with this move, as fun as it is. I don't know if you're starting to see the pattern yet, but it'll make sense when we get to Hellion. And so we have Man-at-Arms is another example. So we have Courageous Abandon. This move is very fun. I used this move recently. Ignores block, that's good. Hits the front line. I wish this hit rank 2, because again, compared to Howling End, why do I want to go 1-to-1 in terms of my frontline attack? You know, I have to be up at the front, the enemy has to be in the front too. When I can use Howling End, which hits, you know, 1-to-2 into 1-to-2, and ignores block as well. So the other thing too is you can't do this reliably on turn 1 because the damage is going to be bad. So you have to sit here and build it. Usually you can't use this move until like turn 3. Like you can get 1 or 2 block tokens, and that's good. You can do it with 2 regular block tokens, but once you get some upgrades and stuff like that, and you have the ability to get block plus, so you can use all 4 of your token slots to give this 400% damage, which is very awesome. But until you're at that point, you know, like you can only use this on like turn 2 or turn 3, and that's if the enemy doesn't hit you and take away some of your block tokens, which means that Retribution gets worse, means that Defender gets worse, it means that Stand Fast is actually pretty good. So when the turn starts, you get an extra block token, so hopefully you don't get hit twice. But that's what you're supposed to do. Like turn 1, Stand Fast, turn 2 or 3, Courageous Abandon, and hopefully no one moves and the enemy doesn't get dodged, you don't get blinded or anything like that at that point, because you can't do this for good value on turn 1. Backdraft. Runaway is the only character that can reliably stack burn. Like you can do Controlled Burn and Firestarter and Malediction, whatever, and then Backdraft afterwards. Like Thick got some really cool Backdraft value in one of his videos, so I know that it can still work and be awesome. And then combat items help this too. But until we get more burn, Backdraft is pretty unwieldy overall. And then, like I said, Controlled Burn is all right. But the other thing too is, does this ignore block? I've only used Backdraft once, but I can't remember if it ignores block. It ignores guard, but does it penetrate block? Like, does it set damage? I cannot remember. But anyway, that's another example. The other characters we don't really care too much about. Like you can buff and stuff like that with Leper, but it's not the same thing. Cause of Death. Ignores block, but not dodge. Dodge is the big issue with a lot of these moves. The other thing too is Cause of Death is only really good as a boss killer. And the bosses that it can kill shouldn't have multiple actions. So there are 2 bosses that have multiple actions. And so out of those 2 bosses, this gets worse because the more actions the enemy gets, the faster they go through their dot stacks, you know, their burn, their blight, and their bleed. And so when they're going through those quickly, then cause of death is just losing damage every turn. Like, you're still doing damage, but then it's losing damage at the same time. So it kind of just isn't that good. And then also, same thing as we've been talking about, you lose to blind, you lose to dodge, because I don't want to hit this when the enemy has dodge. And then there's also like a cutoff point, because you're either going to overkill them by like, 20, or not do enough damage to where it matters. Like, you want to keep the damage over time on top of them. So cause of death is, I want to call it bad. It's not bad. Nothing is just straight up bad, but it's definitely in need of help in terms of like the current pace of the game. So we come down to the skill of the hour, which is Howling End. The entire point of this video is to reference every big damage, heavy hitting move against Howling End, because Howling End is the best one. I don't know if it'll get nerfed. I'll be sad if it does. I feel like it might need to, or the other things need to get buffed desperately. So Howling End is weird because it's like just Wicked Hack plus in terms of damage. You get 5 more crit, but you ignore block and you wind yourself. And it's like, okay, that kind of, doesn't seem that appealing. Why would I do that when I can just hit Wicked Hack twice? Well, being able to get through block is really good. Hellions' normal targets are frontline enemies, and some of the frontline enemies can pack block. So this is good specifically in the Tangle, where foot soldiers spawn with block, or the big knights can get some block. And being able to go right through that is fantastic. You can do this on turn 1 with no other help. That is the biggest reason this move is as good as it is. You don't need combo tokens. You don't need to worry about block. You don't need to give yourself some kind of unchecked power or some other thing to get it set up. You don't need to get into position. Hellion usually is up front anyway. So turn 1, you can just hit this for 8 to 14, or I believe 10 to 16 once it's upgraded. Go right through someone's block, and then you're winded next turn, and you can't even use this on turn 2 anyway after you do that. So the winded token doesn't matter that much, especially when you upgrade toe to toe, because this clears winded. So Hellion can just go Howling End, toe to toe, over and over until the fight is done. And that is such an effective just 2-turn thing. Like, every other character that has to deal with it, like, just loses a lot of momentum or tempo or whatever you want to call it. Like, having to hit stand fast, you lose your turn just setting up block tokens, you're not doing any damage. Using Chaotic Offering, you hurt yourself, and you can also do other random side effects like stunning yourself or moving yourself, which can actually screw you up. Jester with solo is okay, but he doesn't mark himself or combo himself, so enemies are incentivized to hit him. Or he doesn't taunt himself, that's the one I'm looking for. Was it cause of death? What? So when we have Howling End, we get to hit the enemy really hard on turn 1, and then we get to toe-to-toe for extra damage the next turn. And then Hellion just locks herself up in rank 1 and can't be moved, and then she has taunt, and she gets beat up a little bit, which procs her passive. We can't see her passive here, I think, but she has a passive where when she's at 50% life, or lower, she gets 25% bonus damage, and then she gets another plus 25% when she's under a quarter, or another 25%. So if she's under a fourth of her life, she has plus 50% bonus damage. This is before any other trinkets that she can put on. So this thing is already hitting like a Mack truck. This will get through pretty much any enemy in the game in a timely fashion. It will make very short work of size 2s. The only enemy that can really stand up to Howling End easily is Ghoul, and Ghoul is just a road battle. So between these, the fact that all these other damage moves just do not even compare to what this move can do is an issue in the long term. I'd like Hellion to not get nerfed, but if she does get nerfed, if this move gets weaker, the rest of her kit needs to be buffed for her, because the rest of her kit's pretty bad besides like bleed out and her heals. The other characters can kind of survive that way, but I thought I might have more to say, but honestly I'm just going to cut it there because I think I got the point across. So every other damage move in the game that requires turns to set up do not compare to Howling End, because you can Howling End for maximum damage on turn 1, and then this gets further amplified by any battles, like conditions that give you crit or strength, like your trinkets, or if you pick a fight, you know, against the enemies, and sometimes you get to pick modifiers, and that's pretty cool. So Howling End just gets all those bonuses, and its penalty is Winded, which doesn't even matter considering toe-to-toe plus exists. And then also the 1 turn cooldown doesn't matter because you are going to toe-to-toe most of the time immediately after. Then when you compare that to things like Jester starting the next turn dazed with vulnerable in the back of the party, that's bad. Then you have Plague Doctor, who just cause of death, you know, very hard to time correctly. Backdraft has its issues. Courageous Abandon has very limited targeting choices, and you can only reliably do it on turn 2. You're probably waiting until turn 3 most of the time, but I don't know, just nothing compares to how good this move is, besides maybe Burning Stars. But Burning Stars is better at hitting a backline target for big damage, which backline targets usually are more, or they have more access to things like dodge, or blinding you, or status, or whatever. So that's it for the video. Let me know what you're thinking down below. I know it's kind of a ramble of sorts, but I really just want to get this out there while it's still fresh in my brain. And then, like I said, as far as like hero reviews and stuff like that, I'm gonna wait for the patch before I do another one. So that's it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.